feel like there's a spiritualness out there for me. I recently did with friends, my girlfriends were running it at the Himalayan Institute. It was the art of wintering,
Mm,
and how much we are human doers rather than human beings. That we
I
tend to
love
do,
that. Wow,
do,
love that.
and we forget to be. Because everyone's so afraid of the other shoe dropping. You always want to relate to people's trauma. And I had so many people come up to me and be like, I want to relate to you. I want to relate to this. I want to switch things around. Really try to find the good things. What was so surprising to her was that I did not speak of the trauma at all. And she knew how traumatized I was by it.
Yeah. Welcome to the CoachMD podcast. I'm Dr. Charles Glassman, bringing you 3 decades of experience as a physician and a coach. Join us as we navigate the maze of medical advice with real-life stories, empowering you to take charge of your health. In our That Happens segment, guests share transformative experiences, reminding us that we're all human and not just patients. So get ready for a journey into healthcare reimagined, where empowerment and discovery pave the way. Hey, I'm Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD. In my over 30 years of medical practice, I've made it my goal to help people create a strong mind, a healthy body, and an unshakable spirit. And with that, I have started this podcast, and I'm so happy that you've decided to watch it. Thank you for joining us. And I have a guest today who is going to really be emblematic of what I'm trying to do, and that's trying to talk to people who have had experiences with the healthcare system, good, bad, the ugly, everything. And I just want to talk to get an understanding because as a doctor, I would see people, and as I said, I really did not want to uh, take care of people, as I've said in the past. And when when people hear that, they say, "Oh my God, a doctor doesn't want to take care of people." But really, it's not the role of a doctor to take care of people. There are some doctors who, in the case of an emergency, it's all them. But for the most part, a regular doctor who's seeing patients should give people the tools to empower them to take care of themselves. And in that line, in that respect, I am looking for people to want to see how they navigate the healthcare system, but how they use their own tools to become experts in themselves, to see how they can become healthier people, despite sometimes the medical, the healthcare system. And my guest today is a dear friend, Wendy, who has, as I said, had a experience with the healthcare system, and she's going to tell her story. And I think it's a great story. It wasn't great for her going through it, as you'll hear, but it's great to share it so other people can understand just how sometimes you have to advocate for yourself, and the doctors don't know everything, and sometimes you just, like as I said, despite doctors' advice, you have to do what you know is right. So thanks again, Wendy, for coming on and um, agreeing to share your story. And what I'd like you to kind of tell us about when it all started, as far as when you started getting sick or feeling that something wasn't quite right.
Okay, well, I'll jump right into it then.
Yeah.
You saying being an advocate for yourself, I know my body. I feel pretty confident in knowing my body. So that's the first place where advocate, is starting to advocate for myself was just that I felt in the evening like I had the flu. I had hiked, I did my usual daily thing. I'm pretty active. And I just wasn't feeling great. I was having some stomach pain, maybe some, pressure. And so I went to bed and I'm thinking, it feels like a tummy bug. It doesn't feel that serious. Within a couple of hours, I was vomiting, I was
Mm,
having diarrhea. It was just everything was going downhill pretty quickly. And so I think in the morning, I turned to my husband. I'm like, I'm really sick. And maybe it's the flu. And I never, ever have been in an emergency vehicle other than a severe accident. Otherwise, never. I don't go to
mhm.
the hospital. I don't need to. I really take good care of myself. So by 4 o'clock, I couldn't take it anymore. And he
And
took,
when was this, Wendy? How long ago was this?
it was now 8 months ago.
Okay.
So, and it's been a recovery, but
Hmm.
anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's been a
We'll
recovery
talk
right
about
down to
that.
hair loss. Yeah, we'll get into all of
Yeah.
that. But, I knew that something was severe. So we went to the hospital, we were in the emergency room, and I was just laying on the couch, which again is not like me. I want to
No.
be tough. So typically I would just make myself sit there no matter how badly. I was just laying there in a ball, and they had to take me in a wheelchair. And at that point, when they went to stand me up, I fainted and they
Mm.
lifted me onto the bed. And that's kind of where they think maybe my appendix had burst. But at that time, they thought it was enteritis. Um, we stayed until 2 in the morning. There was a CAT scan at about midnight. This is where I would say pretty much all hell broke loose, was
Mm.
that they were switching over systems. So the entire medical system was being changed electronically
Wow.
at
Mm.
midnight. And I
Wow.
was there at midnight.
Oh my
I was there
goodness.
from 4 to 2. So
Wow.
the CAT scan they did, they lost. They lost my blood work.
Oh God.
They had nurses and doctors screaming and yelling at each other. My husband was my advocate. He was just
Yeah.
like, we don't care. Let's focus on my wife.
Yeah. And I know your husband, so
Yeah,
yeah.
we're going to focus on
Yeah.
this. And he was just trying to talk them off a ledge. And it was a lot of that, nurses and doctors coming in saying, we're trying to get this done, but this new system. That's all I heard. I was violently ill.
Mm.
And this is what they're saying to me. So I felt very unsupported. And I said, they gave me pain. The doctor gave me pain medication. And I felt better. I felt a
Yeah.
little better. I kind of passed out. And I said, when I came to, I was like, I think I'm feeling sick again. And he said, you have enteritis. It's severe. You have the flu. It's going to get worse. Before it gets better, we're sending you home.
Oh boy.
And I was like, I know me. This isn't okay. Don't send me home. And they sent me home.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, my sister is saying, get her bed pads, roll up the carpets. I literally could not get out of my bed. And that's not right. There was something
Hmm.
so wrong about the situation. I'm like, I've never had to use pads on my bed. I've never had to, it was
God.
just
Yeah.
extreme. It was extreme.
Yeah.
And I withstood that for another, I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 hours. And I said, I have to go back. And at this point, my doctor friend, who is actually affiliated with that hospital, said, do not go back there. The emergency system is not okay there. It hasn't been in a long time. Go somewhere else.
Hmm.
I just didn't feel I could make it. And I didn't even think of calling an ambulance, and neither
Yeah.
did Mike, because we're a couple of minutes away. So it was like we went back. And at that point, they're like, we just saw you. I'm like, right. I'm not okay. I'm like,
Yeah.
I cannot even verbalize at that point. He was doing all the talking. They said, okay, let's look at you again. We'll do another CAT scan. In the middle of the night, they gave me some more pain medication, and there was no uh, gastro doctor until Monday. So
Hmm.
they said, we're going to admit you. This was so from Thursday. This is now Sunday morning at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And we're going to admit you, and he'll be in on Monday at 9 a.m. and we will go from there. I'm like, okay, I'm in the most severe pain I've ever felt in my life. I
Mm.
can't even imagine how I was going to make it. So they admitted me and gave me pain medication. So I said to Mike, it's going to be a long haul here. So why don't you, we don't know when we're getting a room, go home and I'll fall asleep. And he was like, well, maybe, okay, I'll get a couple hours of sleep. So he went home for 3 hours.
Mm.
Within an hour, I woke up at 5 a.m. I just was throwing up. It was so extreme. It was so
Mm.
extreme. And they had me in an infectious disease room. So they
Mm.
closed the curtains and the door, and the nurse's button didn't work in
Oh
the
God.
emergency room. So I'm hitting the button and I'm sobbing and I'm so beside myself. And I didn't know, I thought this was it. There's no way for me to get out of this bed.
Mm.
I can't do anything. So I heard my phone ping. I didn't know it was in the room, and it was right next to me. So I picked it up, and my friend was saying, "Are you okay? I heard you're in the hospital." And I said, "No." That's all I texted
Yeah.
was no. That's all I could bear. Within seconds, my friend, who's a doctor at the hospital, was there. The entire staff was in my room. The head of the department was holding my hands, apologizing. He had left from, he was supposed to be leaving on a big trip with his family.
Mm.
He came in, everyone was bending over backwards and just like apologizing. And Mike came running in, and he's like, "There's no apology. This is going to fix this. What are we doing?"
Yeah.
At 3 p.m., I got a room. They put me in a room. The doctor came in at 9 a.m. the next morning. I was like a fraction of myself. I could barely speak. So ill, so ill.
Wow.
And he basically, it was Juneteenth.
Mm.
So now, not only are the computer systems a disaster, and it's all we've been hearing about, and they're treating me as a hazmat case. So everybody's coming in hazmat suits, and it's just crazy.
Yeah.
And he's like, "I need you to sign these papers and you guys to agree that no matter what, I'm going in and doing whatever I can. We don't know what's wrong." So I did, signed my life away. Mike
Yeah.
signed my life away, and it was terrifying, but I also was so sick. I was like, do
Right.
whatever you do."
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I mean, and he's running around the hospital. He comes back, his hair's flying. I mean,
Right.
we're giggling because he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm making this happen." And it was on a skeleton system, like they didn't
Mm.
have all the people. And it was a surgery that he's like, "I think it'll take maybe an hour, maybe two." It was almost 4 hours later.
Mm.
So, and Mike was beside himself. My whole family was calling and checking in. And what they discovered was my appendix had burst quite some time ago,
Wow.
days. And all of my organs, I had peritonitis, I had enteritis, I had gangrene, I had sepsis, I had ascites, I had abscesses, I had it all.
Yeah.
And they went in and they just, they put a vacuum in you. That was traumatizing beyond belief. And that
Mm.
just pumped for a couple of days. And my husband brought in a blow up bed and parked next to and he just
Mm.
took care of me. They kept coming in and saying, "You should be a little better by now."
Oh God.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not. I
Yeah.
could not make it more than. He said, "So are you just having be very graphic? Are you just having diarrhea? Maybe 6 or 7 times a day is pretty bad." I'm like,
Yeah.
every 15 minutes,
Yeah.
severely for days. I lost 30 pounds.
Mm. And you don't have 30 pounds to lose. So
It was
just
insane. I looked like
right.
a withered, little old lady. Now I know what I'm going to look like when I'm
Right.
95. When I make it to 95.
Right. That's right.
But I just was a skeleton.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And without my husband being there, I'm not sure that my care would have been
Yeah.
acceptable.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had every day they changed my the antibiotics. It was like a constant course of change and etc. And no, the amazing part to me, there were so many amazing, and I
Yeah.
don't think positively, so
Yeah.
many amazing things that happened. One of them being that none of the systems work together. None of them. So I have the doctor who's done the surgery. He was amazing, but he's
Yeah.
like, "I'm done and you're good. And you can probably go home tomorrow."
Yeah.
Are
Yeah.
you looking at me? Do you see
Yeah.
what's going on here? So that was crazy. And then my doctor, who was the hospital doctor, was like, "Oh no, you need to stay."
Yeah.
And the person who was giving me the antibiotics, he's the
Infectious disease, probably.
yes, infectious disease doctor, was
Yeah.
amazing. And he was like, "Wow, we're going to try something new today. We're going to try something new today," because I wasn't getting better. And eating just, I had nothing besides saline. They didn't put food in. At one point, they gave me potassium, but they gave it to me straight.
Oh boy, it
I
burned.
thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
I honestly, my arm felt like
It burns.
I
Yeah.
had stuck it into a fire,
Yeah.
into a
Wow.
fire. And then the next nurse came along and said they should have never done that. They should
Yeah,
have
of course.
diluted it. And I'm like, How would
Right.
I know that?
Exactly. Right. It's
I
not
can't
your
just I
responsibility to
can't
know that.
advocate for that, and neither
Right.
can my husband. But
Right.
when I was burning, he's like, "You need to stop this immediately."
Yeah.
And he showered me. He washed me every 20 minutes. And we did ask the staff at one point, they're like, we're understaffed. That was how they looked at us. We're
Yeah.
understaffed. This is
Yeah.
what you got.
Wow.
He's like, is there any way we can move to another hospital? Way in the beginning. They're
Yeah.
like, she's too fragile. She can't. It's 50-50 chance here. She can't be moved.
Yeah.
So we just got through it. And he was incredibly strong.
Mm.
My absolute rock. We had our anniversary. We had Father's Day. It's like
Right.
never, people are like, "Oh, your anniversary, how sad." I'm like, I've never felt more loved. I've never
Yeah.
felt more supported. This is, you know, this
Yeah.
this is what it's all about.
Yeah. So I just want to back up a little bit. Initially, when it started happening, just kind of explain to my audience of what actually was happening to Wendy. Um, so usually the appendix, what the appendix is a little vestige. It's about 3.5 inches long.
Yeah, it's like the size of your
Right.
finger.
Yeah. 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 And it's at the end of the colon. So when we eat, the food goes into our stomach, goes into our small intestine, and that's the small intestine where all the nutrients are absorbed. And then the waste material goes into the colon. Now, the small intestine attaches to the colon, and right around the part where it attaches is the appendix. And the appendix is a little pocket. So people may know of diverticulosis, which are pockets that form in the colon. And so basically, it's a little pouch, little cul-de-sac at the end of the colon. If that gets blocked off by some type of obstruction, then, well, as we know, there's a lot of bacteria in the colon. And if that gets blocked off, the bacteria kind of has nowhere to circulate. And it can get infected. The bacteria can overgrow, cause an abscess. And if that abscess, if it's undiagnosed, it can expand and then it can burst. It can explode into the lining of what lines the abdomen, which is called the peritoneum. So it gets in there, causing an inflammation called peritonitis. And it's when it gets in that, the bacteria, then it's like Wendy was saying, it's long gone. I mean, you have to act right away because bacteria gets into the bloodstream, and that's where sepsis, Wendy mentioned sepsis. That's when actually bacteria is in the bloodstream. Blood is sterile, doesn't have bacteria or, there might be a little bit, but hardly any bacteria in the blood. When bacteria gets in the blood and starts replicating in the blood, it's life-threatening. Doctors usually make the diagnosis of appendicitis. In the ER, they're usually hyper vigilant about that. In fact, it's like figure it's that or nothing. But I know I know what was happening when Wendy came in there, and I know what was in the mind. Look, you have this woman, and again, yeah, I don't want to get into a whole thing with that, but I will mention that it is true that sometimes doctors may look at women as complainers, okay, some women. And so Wendy came in there. They didn't know Wendy from a hole in the wall. I know Wendy. If I saw Wendy like that, I would say, whoa, wait a second. They didn't know Wendy. They saw this woman. Oh, she's kind of a wimp, kind of being wimpy. She has a stomach virus. She's rolled up like a ball, and she's passing out. How dramatic, whatever. I mean, and I could see that things were changed. This is what I'm speculating is going on in their head. I don't know that for a fact, but I kind of have that sense because it wouldn't have gone this far if they had an inkling, if they weren't treating you with that kind of attitude, you wouldn't have gone home. I mean, they had
That's
to
what I think
feel,
too. Yeah.
yeah, there had to be something in there that they weren't taking you seriously. Yeah, I know things were changing over, but a CAT scan is going to make that diagnosis lickety split. I mean, any CAT,
Well,
you
I
do it.
guess
Go ahead.
here's what they actually said to me
Yeah,
was the second CAT scan, because they lost the first one, even though
yeah.
they read it a certain way, that it had flattened so much already and it was hiding.
Okay. I mean,
But
yeah,
I still am more on in your camp, by the way.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I could see. I mean, yeah, I mean, you still should, if at that time when it burst, because it's flattened because it's burst. Okay. It's
Right.
like a balloon that deflates, right? It's flat, right? But you do see changes in the peritoneum. You see the inflammation of the peritoneum. I'm not a radiologist, but I'm figuring that. So I think what was happening is that look, doctors have I was a doctor, I know, and I know my colleagues, and I know how getting into a doctor's head and getting into a doctor's head, and I'll just kind of educate people on that. I mean, you are looking at people who have a lot of responsibility, but they also were most of them, a lot of them, always, first and always throughout their education, were always up there and kind of elitist in the educational world, in whether it's high school, college, medical school. So there's a little bit of a chip on a doctor's shoulder when somebody's coming in advocating for themselves or a family member that what are they who are they? It's what I call the one up phenomenon. When we're looking to one up, it's a reflex. It's a primitive reflex, to protect ourselves. And unfortunately, that happens. That can get in the way with making a diagnosis like this. And it's interesting, Wendy, what you were saying about how some people would come into the room and say, "Oh, you're only having a little bit of diarrhea, right?" You know, you're never supposed to ask a question like, "You're feeling okay, right? You're feeling better, right?" You don't
Right.
ask that. You ask, "How are you feeling?" And
How are you feeling?
yeah. So I remember when I was an intern and I was on the surgical rotation, and they were debriding. Debriding means cutting out necrotic tissue, cutting out, and you said gangrene.
Mhm.
That's when oxygen is you're deprived, a tissue is deprived of oxygen, and it dies off. And I remember the surgeon, he was a resident, so he was only a year or two ahead of me. He was debriding. He was with a knife on somebody's foot, like cutting out the dead tissue, because that's what you're supposed to do, cut the dead tissue, so the live tissue. And I mean, that's painful, right? So yeah, you give the patient pain medication, but when you're on live tissue, I don't care how much pain medication you give somebody, it's not going to help. So this doctor is, as he's cutting, and the patient's like, oh, like, "So that's not hurting that much, right?" And he's cutting. Doesn't hurt that much.
Let me do it on you. Let's see if
Right,
you feel
exactly.
well.
Yeah. So, it's a lot of people who listen to my podcast, and they feel like I dump on doctors, whatever. And look, I was a doctor. I know my colleagues, I know the pressure they're under, but what you went through is really emblematic of how important it is when you are a doctor to take a step back and just listen and
Mhm.
try to get the whole picture, get the gestalt of what's going on. And I that was kind of my thing when I was the senior resident, when I was in training, and I used to take my team into a room and then leave the room and ask after we examined the patient. And I didn't want to know all the medical students and the interns and residents quoting me the textbook or whatever. I wanted to tell them to tell me, what was your gestalt, right?
Mhm.
What was your whole picture?
What did you learn about this
Right.
person?
What did you learn? Look at Wendy over here. What do you think? You think she's sick? What do you think? Yeah, I mean, look at their vital sign. Look at put the whole thing together. Don't use your preconceived idea of who you think Wendy is to make that decision. Okay, you got to treat it. So anyway, when before we did this podcast, I asked Wendy if she was okay talking about it, because there's a lot of trauma through this. This is PTSD material, right? So so now you had the surgery and you're in the hospital. Take us, what happens next?
So I was there for 11 days. It was a
Wow.
long haul
Mm,
for today's, timing on
yeah.
surgeries and anything that you have done. You're usually in and out. It was a very, so this is where it gets funny. I know that my body is a whole thing. I have mind, I have spirit, I
Mhm.
have soul, I have tissue, I have all of that. And it's amazing how disconnected it is in the hospital.
Oh yeah.
So when they first brought me food, it had nothing to do with, they didn't ask about my dietary needs or what, just she's empty, you got to fill her up. We're going to start with fluids. And starting with fluids, that was okay because it literally is fluids.
Right.
So it's
Right.
like some vegetable broth. Well, maybe I don't eat, at that point I did eat chicken, but they didn't ask. No one's asking. And I did say I don't do dairy products. And so they brought me skim milk
Hmm.
because I don't do dairy.
Oh, well, it's skim milk, Wendy. Come on, it's skim. I
I
mean,
was like,
it's skim
what?
milk. Is that dairy,
I
really?
kept reading it and I was so out of it, So
I
I'm really
know.
trying to. Mike looks
Yeah.
and he goes, no, this is 100% skim milk.
Right.
It's not, I was like,
Yeah.
this, what? And then, so they bring you a little bit of food each time. And of course, the cream of wheat is fine and the cream of rice. And I'm like, okay. I started noticing then something was going on with me. They brought me vanilla yogurt and tasted it. I'm like, the lemon in this is so intense, I can't even put it in my mouth. Like I
Mm.
put it in a spoonful, and the nurse is like, it's vanilla. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I could
Yeah.
not, my taste buds were so shot.
Wow.
Everything was different.
Yeah.
So when they brought the liquids, they brought me coffee, tea, veggie broth, and like weird stuff,
Yeah.
really weird mixture. You would never be drinking coffee at this point.
Right.
Anyone in their right mind would never put
Yeah.
coffee into their body at this point. I have just been going to the bathroom 40 times a day
Yeah.
for 10 days. That just wouldn't happen. So that was odd to me. I'm like, this hospital is taking care of me. What is going on? And then by the time I got to my first solid meal was collard greens and this decadent chicken with all kinds of sauces
Right.
and things on it. And I looked at Mike and I just started crying. I was
Yeah.
like, I
Yeah.
can't even look at it. I haven't put a bite in my mouth. I have no taste for anything. And he ran right out and just got me something super bland,
Mm.
healthy, some quinoa, whatever it was. So he was running out for meals 3 times a day for me.
Yeah.
And I was in the hospital. That was really disturbing to me to
Yeah.
think that the when you're in the hospital, part of your medical care is what you put into your body, how you
Absolutely.
nutrition. How is nutrition not even thought about? It's not even a consideration at
Yeah.
all.
It
At all.
isn't. I've always had a problem with that. I really
It's
hated that
crazy.
when I would go in and visit my patients. In fact, some hospitals, I don't think they do this anymore, but they used to have McDonald's that would open up in the hospital, and they used to bring patients McDonald's
Incredible.
to, yeah, because it's there are nutritionists on staff, but the nutritionists are registered dietitians, and with all due respect, it's an intense training. They have to learn, but it's learning textbook. It's similar like how doctors are taught interacting and learning about medicine. It was always I was never the hot shot, really. I wasn't the hot shot. I wasn't number one in my class. Those who were number one in their class and are hot shots are the ones who could spit out the most facts and who could really impress the attendings and that's not really what you're about. And so the registered dietitians have a template, they have a blueprint, and they
Mhm.
have what's the typical diets, not considering that every body is different.
Literally
Every
every
Yeah,
body.
you had your needs, you had different needs, especially with what you went through. I mean, the
Right.
trauma to your
I had
body.
a stomach. You're
Right.
dealing with my stomach. You're literally, that's where the injury was.
Yeah.
So then to not even consider that as being the injury was shocking to me. Like if I had my leg blown off.
Right.
Okay, we can talk about just giving me coffee. I'd be ready
Right.
for coffee,
Right.
But it was my stomach that was the
Yeah.
problem. So the food that they were bringing me was so, and I wasn't being picky or like, it just really was shocking to me that that's how, yeah, that was shocking. So
Yeah.
thankfully, I mean, I have an incredible, this is how I got through, but so much love and support and people by my side and advocating for me, whether it be, doctors that I knew or my husband for sure,
Yeah.
my kids being there. I never
Yeah.
was left alone. Um,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
that's, you mentioned that you're lying in a hospital bed and completely divorced from the healthcare system in the hospital is the mind, body, spirit. It's 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 gone. I mean, nobody's talking about that. Nobody wants to talk about it. Everybody's stressed. They want to do, and I know, look, I know you have the doctors and the hospitalists and the medical students. When I was an intern, I used to have a checklist. Now it's on the computer, but I used to have boxes, and I used to have to go on rounds in the morning and have a list of about, I don't know, 20 different items that I had to complete. And it was called scut work. That was what we were the scut monkeys, right? That we had to go and do all this stuff. And that's what we had to do. We're, kind of myopic in our approach and just doing our duties. And unfortunately, that kind of translates into how you were treated in a sense, just the things they had to do, just your body, not considering that your support system. And I want to stress that so much that if you have anybody in the hospital, you have to advocate for them. It's great to have a doctor in the family or a doctor friend. If you don't have that, you have to advocate as a family member because even if the doctors are so sure and telling you that this is what it is, as you could see, Wendy, they were saying, oh, no, this is what it is. It's enteritis. This is what it is. But Wendy had a loving family and a strong husband who was not going to take no for an answer and needs to know. And you don't have to be, this isn't being aggressive, it's being assertive. The difference between aggression and being assertive is win-win. Okay. Aggression is I win, you lose. And unfortunately, when you aggressive, the doctors become aggressive also. And
negative.
they don't want to be one-upped, So it's best to be assertive and to ask those questions. And fortunately, that's a big part, and that's a part of nobody puts a prediction of how that will help, but it's that love, with what you went through, Wendy, and I know you can say this now, you really could have died. You
Yeah.
really could have. I mean, what you're telling me, I've seen patients who have died like that. And if you didn't have a family, unfortunately, without a family, because the healthcare system is stressed and the doctors and nurses are stressed, without a family, a lot of times, I'm giving you the inside scoop, people, a lot of times you're
Mhm.
kind of left alone and they don't give you as much attention because it's almost like, well, if something happens, they won't be blamed for it, because there's nobody around who really cares, so we're going to put our attention to the squeaky wheel, so to speak. And you want to be a squeaky wheel in the hospital. And I mean, your story is a perfect example of that,
And
when,
when we were in actually that hospital phase, we were less squeaky because Mike knew how to take care of me.
yeah,
They brought him, they're like, we're understaffed. Here's gloves. Here's changing clothes. Here's like literally, they gave Mike all the stuff that I thought nurses were. I was thrilled that my husband was
yeah,
doing this for me.
yeah, yeah,
But if he wasn't there,
yeah,
and we did ask it, how long would I be laying in my excrement because it was constant, and I couldn't take care of myself. I had a commode sitting next to me,
yeah.
and I couldn't get to it. And she said maybe an hour or more, probably more.
Mm,
And I had rashes. I had rashes from the medication. I had rashes from the way I was in my bed. It was a constant, and Mike took care of all of that. And if he wasn't there, I would have been much sicker.
Yeah.
Like just things would have been much harder, much sicker. And we weren't even squeaky because he was there.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you,
Yeah.
this was a true indication of that. At the very end, as we're leaving, the nursing staff that had been there all week all came in and said, you're it might make me cry a little bit, but you're the most beautiful couple we've ever seen. We've never seen so much love in our lives. I hope I find this in my life.
Mm.
And that they thanked him. They're like, you have
Mm.
no idea how you helped us this week in our job. I mean, it was unbelievable. And that was kind of a beautiful moment, although
Yes.
very like terrifying at the same time when
Yeah.
you're thinking about like what would care be like. Because there were points, and Mike was so sensitive to them, to the
Mm.
nursing staff, because they were really doing the bulk of things.
Yes.
And he was very much like he would go out and just ask for something, and they'd gladly give it to him because they knew he was helping.
Yes.
You know, he
Yeah.
was essentially helping. So he'd be like, do you have extra large gloves? Because all they had were medium, you know, and he wanted to be able to use them.
Yeah.
And just different products. If it's like, this is not strong enough, she's got such a bad rash, what can we do?
Yeah.
They'd go searching. But it was really like every little thing,
Yeah.
if he had not been there.
Yeah. That's a great example of how you be assertive, right? And
Very
it's,
kind and
yes,
assertive.
very kind. Okay. And that, even in regular communication with people in general, it's okay to be assertive, but you can do it in a way that you get your way. You share your gratitude. One of the best ways, and obviously Mike was very good at that. It's very good to acknowledge that somebody has a tough job.
Yeah.
So, because you needed to get out of there and get well. I mean, you needed to get well and get out of there.
And you got to get well by getting out of there. It's
Exactly.
a double. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And to do that, it's always better to be to ask questions and to be assertive, but to do it in a way. So for instance, I could just see Mike doing this, going to the nurses. Oh, wow. It's really, I know it. I know it's tough. You have a lot. Is there any way that you can help me get this,
Yeah.
these larger gloves or whatever? I know it was done in a way to get it done. So many people get into arguments and they're trying to advocate for themselves or their family, but they do it in a hostile way. They do it not understanding that the other person who they need something from also has something going on in their lives or their job or their
Well,
circumstance.
it's one nurse. Mike said, how many patients do you have? And how many, she's like, there's one of me and I have 12 patients right now.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's unacceptable.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
just not,
Yeah.
because she had a violent patient. She had to call the police. It's not a calm environment that you're hanging
No,
out in,
it's
by the
not,
way, when
right?
you're trying to recover. It's like,
Right.
I didn't want to be there. And I actually had to, at one point, say, whoa, Nellie, I hope he doesn't think he's letting me out now, because my physician, my surgeon said, I think you can go tomorrow.
Right.
Like he was
Yeah.
right. I was like, I have not eaten anything. I
Yeah.
don't think I can go tomorrow.
Yeah.
And luckily the hospital didn't think that way at all, but he was freaking me out because as he's talking, literally talking to me while I am sitting on the commode
Yeah.
that I can't get off of.
Right.
I'm
You're a
like,
captive audience.
I don't see this happening. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it was just an interesting,
Yeah.
but having, I mean, I don't know if you're ready for this part yet, but the after,
Yeah, we're gonna definitely talk. I want to talk about that because I just want to mention that that's why I didn't become a surgeon. Honestly, I did my internship in surgery,
oh,
but I didn't become a surgeon because I, for me, it was more about the whole person, and that's who I was. That's who I am.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you need surgeons. Don't get me wrong,
absolutely.
but the surgeon is one track mind. Cut it out, and I'm done.
I'm
That's
done.
it. I'm
You're
done.
good.
You're
Did your
on your
job.
own. I'm done. Cut it out. and you needed to have a cutout. You had a diseased appendix, even though, we don't know really what the appendix does. Does it store bacteria, good bacteria? We don't know. But it
There's
doesn't
a
matter.
magical person
Right. Yeah.
I've been talking about.
Hey, there he is. Yes. Thanks for joining us. Great to see you, Mike.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Your ears
Talking about the
are
magic.
must
Am
be
I on
ringing.
the air? Is this being recorded?
It is being recorded. It's fine. I love it. It's perfect.
Precious cargo here.
I
Special
hear you.
handling required.
Yes, yes. And I have to tell you that thank you for keeping her precious and healthy, because I asked Wendy before we started this whether or not it was okay to I wanted her to tell the whole story, and I didn't want it to be too traumatic. So we're in the midst of it, but we're talking about how well you handled being assertive and advocating for her, and the way to do that, because what my podcast is all about is trying to help people navigate the healthcare system and advocating for oneself, and considering that mind, body, and spirit is just as important in recovery and healing, and love of family is part of that spiritual, and how important it is to do that. And also understanding when you need something from someone, like with the nurses, you needed them to help you, and they were stressed beyond belief, but advocating for the person you love, you didn't want to get in arguments with them. You wanted them to be okay. And so I can just hear you and see you doing that.
Hard to navigate that emotional response with, you don't want to go, you want to make sure that they're aware that this is important, but you don't want to put them on the defensive where they're not, they're trying to cover their tracks rather than trying to fix the issue.
Exactly. And so, yeah. So thank you for that. And I appreciate it's making, to kind of bringing this whole picture into place, because the fact that what Wendy went through really was life-threatening, and she could have died if she didn't have your support, your advocates, being an advocate for her and being assertive in that way. And I make the distinction between assertiveness and aggressiveness. And being assertive is that you really helped in the process. The surgeon obviously was vital, but that's only one part of you can cut it out. But I've seen so many people, unfortunately, in my career who have had the surgery successfully, maybe not this particular surgery, but then the surgeon washes their hands of it because they've done their job, but then things don't go right. And things don't go right because
things that happened that really freaked me out. One was, I thought to myself, what if I wasn't there? Mm-hmm. What if, even if I was there, I didn't I just put myself in the shoes of somebody else who, might not have, the ability to communicate, or, somebody who speaks a different language, or isn't as familiar with, some of these terms, even though I'm not, a doctor, obviously. I was able to, kind of ask the why, well, then why, and then why, and then why, and keep on asking those questions and get to what the essence of the matter was, and help kind of guide them down a path that I don't know, probably should have been obvious to them, but it wasn't.
Yeah. And
then the other thing was, there's so much transferring of care from one practitioner to the next, nurse to a different nurse, to a different nurse, to the person who brings her the food, to the doctor, to the surgeon, to the specialist. And not everybody has all the information. Maybe they should have access to it. They probably do. But, by me being there, I had it all because I had all those conversations and all those instructions fresh in my head.
Yep.
And if I weren't there to kind of convey and fill in some of the gaps, who knows what would happen.
Yeah. And it's so important. And that's why I stress for anybody who's listening that you really have to advocate. And it's very easy for healthcare providers to just kind of drop the ball. And that's the reality, because they have so many others that they have to deal with. And if you're not asserting and advocating, it's just human nature to
Just
say,
be,
okay,
yeah.
yeah, I'm just going to move on. And if something happens, well, they don't have anybody advocating for them,
Right.
so it
Right.
doesn't matter as much in a way.
Right. And the other thing is, after everything went down with Wendy and we were kind of in the clear, I asked for records of everything that everyone who she met, everything that she was administered, every test she was given, the results of those tests. And I never got all those records. And I can imagine how, things go south in a hospital and somebody, they lose somebody and they just kind of walk away and move on to the next patient.
Right.
And there's no one there to say, well, wait a minute, what actually happened when you did this test and when you performed that procedure? And there's it's just a black hole.
Yeah. Well, and that's where the whole idea of malpractice comes in, because doctors, we used to do autopsies way back when. Okay? There are no autopsies anymore.
Right.
And autopsies were the greatest tool for learning, because if somebody died, something went wrong, you want to know what it was so you can learn to prevent it. But the medical malpractice, and this is where I'm go to kind of educate my audience of really how doctors think, because this plays a big role in that. And the first instinct, unfortunately, for many, many doctors is not the patient, but did I do something or could I do something that could get me sued? And it messes you up. You're in a worse position. You're actually more likely to get sued because you're not thinking what the best thing is to really help someone. And a lot of doctors are going to fight me on this, but it's the real truth. And I know it being in practice. I tell the story of when I was seeing, I don't know, 40, 45 patients a day. And early in before I changed over my practice, a guy walked into my office in his early 50s, totally out of shape. I mean, really, really unhealthy appearing. First time, I never saw him before. I walked into my office. My very first thought was, oh God, now this guy, he's my responsibility. If anything goes wrong, they're going to blame me. That was my very first thought. And I'm not someone who's paranoid. I'm not a doctor, but how about doctors how about when something starts going wrong?
Right.
Those doctors, they were looking to cover their butt.
Yeah, backpedaling.
Instead of helping you, really, I mean,
and that was honestly my first thought when all this started going on with Wendy was, she came in with symptoms of appendicitis and it took them 4 days to diagnose it. So what happened? You took a CAT scan
and lost CAT scan.
We took blood work and you didn't get a result. How often does it happen that somebody comes in with a condition that doesn't get diagnosed right away because, someone didn't take the right steps or somebody didn't read the data correctly?
I mean, any malpractice attorney listening to this podcast is going to contact you.
Well, here's the deal.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave the rest of this conversation.
Right. Okay. Great seeing you, Mike. Thanks.
So, apology letter from the hospital that arrived.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's wow.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
And when the thought crossed my mind, I've never even considered any legal strategies in my lifetime. I haven't had to. But it was brought to my attention so many times by so many doctors and so many different people. I'm like, should I be pursuing this? So I just looked into it, and the end result was knock on a million pieces of wood, and let's hope it never happens. But I don't have existing trauma that I am aware of, and there's a karmic element to it.
Absolutely.
So I feel like I'm the healthiest I've ever been. And, that's where it's at. And not to go down that road is just not my jam.
Wow.
It's not my husband's jam. It's just not.
Love it. Wendy, I just, I didn't know that. I had no idea before we had this podcast, but knowing you as a person, I could kind of figure that. So many people in my career, you can imagine, have asked me if they should sue.
Yeah.
And what my answer to them was, and had recovered. And
Yeah.
I said, you know what? You do have a lawsuit. You do. And
Right.
you do.
Right.
Somebody what, however, do you want to stay sick?
Yeah.
Because you're going to have to stay sick for at least 4 or 5 years, because by the time this lawsuit, the depositions and all of that, you're going to have to remain sick. You're going to have to, something is going to have to be in your body, in your life, and your whole interaction with people to confirm that you're still sick.
And that's mentally going to get you there.
Yeah,
That's the problem. You
absolutely.
want to be sick.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
scream from the rooftops. I'm more healthy than I've ever been because of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. And so I want to talk about now, you, you know, by the good graces of whatever, okay, uh, you know, we talk about spirit. My idea of spirit may not be exactly your idea of spirit. Doesn't
I'm
matter.
very spiritual, and it
It
probably is.
doesn't matter. Okay.
Yeah.
To me, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Some people it does. To me, it doesn't matter, because
Yeah.
we embrace something that's greater than ourselves, that's more than our five senses can explain or predict or understand, but it has a massive impact on how we are as people, how we interact with people, how we interact with our physical world, but also our health and well-being. And so you came out from a life-threatening illness in so many, there's so many facets about it. And we could have a whole other discussion on each individual one. But what I really want to talk about now is you left the hospital, you had lost 30 pounds, you were totally malnourished. The doctors pumped you up with antibiotics. And I know one of my pet peeves when I was in practice, when we give patients antibiotics, they always should be on probiotics. And most doctors, they laughed at me. This is way back. They would laugh at me because I'd always write prescriptions for the only probiotic that they had on the formulary,
At that
which was,
time, right?
yeah, and actually probably still now. It was it was only acidophilus, which
Oh, right, right.
is insignificant, is insufficient for the blasting of antibiotics. I used to tell patients to sneak in, have their family sneak in probiotics and give it to them. Don't tell the doctors you're on this, but because you are destroying your good
Ev-
bacteria in your body. So
Everything's gone.
so
Yeah.
you had that done because you were blasted with the antibiotics, and you needed the antibiotics. Don't get me
Right.
wrong. They saved your life, as did the surgery. And also a big part of that, which people won't give enough credit for, is the support of your family, which saved your life.
Feels
Um,
huge. Yeah.
but you also lost 30 pounds. You were malnourished. Actually, let me back up for 1 second. When you said the hospital sent an apology letter, I am so pleased with that, because doctors have always been reluctant to admit that because of the fear of malpractice. And there have been studies showing that when you do admit it, when you are apologetic, that it actually, and in a way, and you have to do it in the right way.
Right.
You can't say, "Oh man, I'm an idiot. I screwed up. I was drunk the night before." Whatever.
Right. Well,
You
now
know,
you got a problem.
right, right. You have to do it in a way that's that. But anyway, so here you
Sincere
are.
is a nice way.
Yeah,
Sincere
exactly.
is
Right, right.
sincerity is nice.
Yeah, yeah.
It,
Um, so here you left the hospital, and so take us through kind of what happened next.
so that was the funny thing. I made an appointment with my physician, my general practitioner immediately, just because I felt like I need to see what's going on with this thing.
Yeah.
Like, and I went in, tiny little backstory. I've had IBS my whole life. So I've had, and to be honest, my last visit with my doctor, which was just this past week, I said, I wonder if I've just always had a little sick,
Mm,
appendix. Who the heck knows? There's so much not known about them.
absolutely. So
And
much.
she's like, who knows? She's like, I'm not going to say no. I was like, maybe it's just always been a little thing in there that's caused problems. But I have always had like dairy issues. Um, so just IBS, nerves. I
Right.
do.
Let me I just wanted the IBS just for the audience. Most
Yes.
people know
Now
it,
that I
but
brought that up.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Irritable bowel syndrome. And irritable bowel syndrome is basically when a doctor throws up their hands and says, I don't know why
It's your stomach.
it's your stomach. Right. And honestly, for my line over the years, and actually to my own family, my own children, I say, you know what? It's something, but it's nothing.
Right.
Okay. It is
Right.
something, but
It's
it's
something.
nothing. Okay. So meaning it's nothing that's going to hurt you. Appendicitis,
Exactly.
on the other thing, is something and something. Okay. But it
Right.
could be something and nothing at the same time. And irritable
Yes.
bowel syndrome, we know the mind,
Plays a
the
huge role.
brain and the
God.
gastrointestinal system are, and one connection I'll just, very quickly. Um, when the fight or flight kicks in, and fight or flight is our primitive response. I talk about it a lot in some of the books I wrote, Brain Drain and Fake News Stories by Your Brain. When we're faced with danger, we fight or flight. And one of the things that we need to do when we're fleeing is to get rid of waste.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we get butterflies. That's why we might have diarrhea, whatever, sometimes. But that just shows you that the brain and the gut are
So
connected.
connected.
And we don't know exactly how, but part of it will explain IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. But
Yeah.
go ahead. Okay.
So anytime, this is
Yeah.
funny, my whole life, like if I have a stomach ache or I'm on the potty, it's like, my mom or my family will say, "What are you upset about? What happened? Or what are you excited about?" Like,
Yes.
it could be I
Yeah.
was excited about something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when at certain points in my life, it's been almost debilitating where
It
I've,
can be. Sure.
really very, very painful and very whatever. But interesting that when I met my husband, who he just, I don't know, our spirits just go well together. IBS was very seldom,
Mm.
has happened, but very seldomly through the last 20 years or 25 years. So needless to say, I get out. I'm, like you said, the good and bad are gone. And I felt a little like I'm starting from ground zero. So let's do it right.
Yeah.
That's what I felt like. And I was a pretty healthy person before, making
Absolutely.
good choices, etc. But I do feel like I had this moment of clarity, like, let's just start from ground zero. So I, it was partially helped by the fact that a lot of things didn't even taste good to me. So I really had to force myself to eat some things that even were healthy. But I didn't go, I loved coffee and I loved dark, rich, crazy coffee. And I had to have two big cups in the morning and one in the afternoon. So not a terrible addiction, but an addiction. And so I was like, I'm gonna switch over to tea. And I think I'm gonna
Mm.
go, maybe the matcha root green tea, take it down a notch. I do one a day. I started there. So that addiction's gone. Like I don't have the highs and lows of caffeine. And then I always had a glass of wine with dinner. And there's nothing wrong with that, people. But
Yeah.
I was like, if I felt, whether it be habitual or partial addiction, whatever it was, that feeling of just that little bit of high, whatever it was, I was like, I have zero interest in how you drink,
Mm.
zero. And I was like, why do it? If I don't want it, it's a toxin. It's not great for my body. Why do it? So now it's been 8 months, no coffee, 8 months, no, I have zero interest. Um, and I was a meat eater and good meat and usually grass fed and all of that, which is, I grew up that way. I grew up
Yeah.
with organic, but I grew up on a farm. We didn't
Yeah.
call it organic. It was just, we
Right. Just
raised
what
our
it
food,
was. Yeah.
and we ate our food. And that's what I believe in, and it should be done that way. But I
Mm.
don't have a taste for meat really. So I obviously am paying close attention to protein based things and healthy things, but mostly from the earth up, ground up stuff. And I'm trying to think what else. Probiotics, I started right away. They didn't talk to me at all about that in the hospital.
Right.
I just had a major stomach trauma. It didn't even come up. And I knew probiotics were the
Yeah.
thing. So I take a pretty heavy probiotic every day. I have not had one. I could eat, if I ate a piece of cheese pizza, I would be kind of like a tummy wreck
Yeah.
for the rest of the day. It would be a disaster. Now, having given all that I've changed, if I were to have a piece of pizza now, I have zero effect. It just tastes good and I enjoy it. So I'm on
Wow.
the other side of like, just I have more energy. There's not a marriage to any ritual, the glass of wine with dinner, coffee in the morning. I don't have a ritual. And it frees me up.
Yeah.
I guess it's the best I could say. Like, I can come and go as I please. I'm not showing up somewhere, but I have to have this. But I didn't have this yet. And that is how we live life. It's human nature.
Absolutely.
Have like, a pattern and this is a side note, but Mike and I always try and change our patterns, like switching the side of the bed and stuff, because they say it's really healthy for you. It's really good for you
Yeah.
to pattern yourself all the time. So this was something that I've repatterned and I feel free. I guess that's the word I'm going to use. I
Yeah.
feel free.
It's amazing, how you were really this life-threatening assault on your body. And what's interesting and how you're talking about these things that you're doing, these are things that you're doing on your own. Your doctor didn't say, okay, Wendy, I want you to change some of your habits, your rituals. I want you to start taking probiotics. I want you to get out in nature, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And these are things that you're doing without the guidance of a healthcare practitioner, a doctor. And isn't that what a doctor is supposed to do? Then that's why I go back to how I never like to take care of people, because I want to help provide information and tools to help people take care of themselves. And you know your body best. That's why you knew your body best when it was very sick, and trying to convince others that I know my body and this is not right. And now you're decided to take care of your body. And it's interesting because doctors never got nutrition. Look, I went to medical school many years ago. Okay. And we're still doing the same thing we're doing. And yeah, so we had, I think, a day or two in biochemistry about vitamins, whatever, nothing about food, nothing about nutrition. And the rituals that we have, most people are in habits of eating and doing the same thing all the time. And what we don't realize, I talk a lot about what I call the automatic brain. And the automatic brain is our primitive animalistic instincts. Okay. And that's separate from our divine nature, which is our spirituality, our connection with source energy, with God, or whatever you want to define it as. And that's separate from this primitive nature part of it. Doctors focus on the primitive, the animalistic, the automatic brain, because that automatic brain is what causes illness most of the time, and is a lot in our body and what goes wrong in our body. And that the fight or flight is part of that. And so when we develop habits and rituals, that's our brain's way. That's our primitive nature protecting us, keeping us in these comfort zones. And we don't even realize it. And studies have not been done on this. And I don't think studies can be done on it. But I'm going to go out on a limb to say that the cells in our body are controlled by this primitive automatic brain, just like the big brain. The very cells in our body get used to the environment that they're in. So our habits, let's say we're obese, the cells in our body get very familiar with that obese milieu, that obese environment. So the different chemicals that are circulating in the blood, they get very comfortable. They don't want to change. They keep you stuck. So that's why one has to break those rituals, break those habits, and get those cells to kind of step out of their comfort zone so they develop new comfort zones. And so you kind of trick your brain instead of fighting and fleeing, because if you change it, you'll fight and flee. The body's going to fight and flee. It's going to reject it. So a lot of times we go back into it. So it's important, like you said, to kind of change it up. And I think that's a great advice for anybody. And I really want to, your story is so great, Wendy, because so many people define themselves as by their illness. And like you're saying, how great you feel now, and you were on death's door. I mean, I don't want to be dramatic, but you really were. I mean, I've seen it so many times in my career, and you came out of that, and you came out of it even better. Unfortunately, so many people will define themselves, and they'll say, "Oh God, I have appendicitis. I had it. I can't get over it. I'm still sick with it.
Right.
I am prone to these things." You know, when you say I am or I have, you take possession
Very
over
powerful.
it.
Yes.
And you haven't done that. You've released it. So you've done those things, okay? And those things are treating the body as far as breaking your rituals, breaking your habits, doing the probiotics, changing your diet. I know you're a big hiker and you're in nature, and
Every day.
yes, and I want you
Every
to
day.
just talk to us about that and your experience and how that has helped in your healing.
I find we always say, you know, I'm taking meetings on the mountain. Like, I go out there with friends. It's my social time. It's also my quiet time. It's kind of where I find everything, and yoga, both. And I just feel like there's a spiritualness out there for me.
Mm,
I recently did, this is a little something to share. I recently did with friends, my girlfriends were running it at the Himalayan Institute. It was the art of wintering,
mm,
and how much we are human doers rather than human beings. That
mm.
we
I
tend to
love
do,
that. Wow,
do,
love that.
and we forget to be.
Love
And
that.
wintering isn't that everything's dead. You know, I'm looking out my window right now, it's some pretty lush stuff. Maybe the colors are a little more muted in tone, or they're more, the hue and the values are a little softer, or they're in the browns and the greens, but they're beautiful and they're out there and they're happening, and the brooks are babbling, and the, you know, things are, some moss is vibrant and growing. Nothing's killing moss, you know, but a lot of things need to winter, and they need to calm down and quiet themselves and go internal so that they can grow and they can rejuvenate.
Mm,
So as we're, and I tend to be very much a doer. So when I'm out there doing, I'm actually feeling like I'm being, you know, I get to do a little
mm,
of both. And I find some things that I found during this yogic retreat was I was able to say, and my friend who went through all of this with me, she was the one running the program. She's the yogini running it.
mm,
And she's like, what was most shocking to me about you being here and when we talked about things, because you get pretty deep in these things, you know,
mm,
this for me, you know, you have your criers and people going real deep and pulling up some stuff that's
mm,
really painful and hurtful, and I had quite the opposite experience. I was like, each time it would come around to me, I'm like, I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna shout it from the rooftops, because everyone's so afraid of the other shoe dropping,
mm,
that my life is pretty wonderful. I have
mm,
a loving family. Everyone's healthy. The world is a beautiful place. And the reason why I'm going to shout it from the rooftops is because two things are guarantees: change and death.
yep.
They're guarantees. So if I'm in this beautiful space, why can't I talk about it? Why
Mm,
can't this be the space I talk about? Instead of, you always want to relate to people's trauma, you know? And I'm like,
abs-
well, and I had so many people come up to me and be like, I want to relate to you. I want to relate to this. I want to switch things around. we also went around the room in winter. People would say, I hate winter. That was the first response.
Yeah.
I have the opposite feeling
Yeah.
with winter. I find things I love in winter.
Yeah.
So that's what you do when you're presented with something that, oh, it's cold, it's uncomfortable, it's maybe not making me feel like my most vibrant self. Go seeking things that are gonna
Mm.
make it feel good to you. Even if it's sitting by a fire, if that's what it is. If it's
Yeah.
keeping warm, that's cool. Fires are amazing. They're amazing. Heating
Yeah.
they're great. But just, I really try to find the good things. And she said what was so surprising to her was that I did not speak of the trauma at all. And she knew how traumatized I was by it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have to honestly tell you, in the 3 days I've been here, I haven't even thought about it,
Wow.
which was incredible.
That's
That was
wonderful.
really
Yeah. I
the
love
first
it.
time I really just completely did
Mm.
not have it enter my psyche.
Mm. Love
So
it.
that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's so easy for people to say, oh, just focus on the positive, focus on the positive, but actually doing the positive.
Right.
See, when you take action and you're actually doing the positive, that's how you heal. That's how you stay healthy. That's how you have, even if something strikes, you're in such a better place. So,
Yes.
so for instance, the idea of the next shoe to drop, everybody's so superstitious. Oh, I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to, and we're worried
You
about the
miss the
next.
moment if you don't.
Exactly.
You
And
missed your moment.
you're in a better place,
Yeah.
in a much stronger place if something does happen. So if something isn't quite right, or it's not so good, and that's also another conversation, whether even if something goes wrong, like you had this horrific experience, but in retrospect, maybe it's something that needed to happen in some strange way. And look where you have arrived.
Mhm.
And now look what you are doing to maybe helping other people who may not be in that well equipped if something does strike. And so maybe you're encouraging now, you're being a doctor now. Okay. In the purest sense of the word, you're being a doctor because you're giving people the tools and you're giving people a path of how to take action and start doing positive, coming back from a life-threatening illness and being vibrant instead of wallowing in it, instead of saying, oh, do I have a malpractice case here? Oh, what can I do to stay sick? What can I do to be ill? What can I do? No, you've decided to embrace it, to live it, to help to really embody mind, body, spirit. And that's what is truly health, in my opinion. Right? I mean, yeah.
That's why I jumped on this when you reached out. I'm like, I absolutely want to do this because I
Yeah,
think it's important to hear the other side of it. I can
absolutely.
absolutely share the medical aspect, and man, is it a big one. But this other side of it, I feel like I've gained so much.
Yeah.
I've gained so much.
Yeah. And before we end, I want you to talk a little bit about your dog, because our
Really?
relationship, yeah, our relationships with our dogs
Uh-huh.
are very therapeutic, and it's not any mystery. A lot of, healthcare facilities are doing that, where they have therapy dogs come in, and doctors are, oh yeah, that's good fluffy stuff. Okay, yeah, that's good, and it's
No, it's
fluffy, it's really
deep.
fluffy,
Yeah, they're
but
fluffy.
yeah,
It's
oh,
deeper.
woo woo stuff. Okay, we'll let you do that. You have that. You want to do that, you do that, but that part of it is sometimes even more important than in the healing process and the medical sciences, in my experience. So
What can't be explained, but it can.
exactly,
It can be
we see
explained.
it,
Yeah.
yeah. So
People say, oh, I just can't explain how this fluffy animal, how this dog did this.
yeah,
Because of the love, the unconditional love,
yes,
literal unconditional love.
yeah,
There's very few unconditional loves in this life. and your spouse is not one of them.
Right. It's
There
true.
are conditions.
Yes.
I
No.
love mine to death. I have conditions. He has
Same with me. Yeah.
Yeah.
We both have very good marriages and loyal
Absolutely.
marriages, but you said it right.
Listen to each other. So
Yes.
yeah, but my mom is unconditional and my
Yeah.
dog is.
Yes. Yeah.
That's, you know, and I just he's the warmth we get from him, and my husband has the same. My kids too.
Yeah.
The way we have responded to bringing a dog into our family, we, you know, try not to dwell on the past, but we a little bit kick ourselves for not doing this
Right.
until
Yeah.
COVID, and my kids were 18 and 21 at the time. And so it's been 4 years, 4 glorious years with this doggy that just brings us joy every day, all day. You know, he hikes with me, he hikes with my husband and I, he's with us all the time. And we are those people that sleep with our dog, we hang with our dog, you know, he's just really a part of our lives all the time.
Wait, Wendy, I'm just okay. So we were talking about, well, actually he has to cut this out. So wait, I got to do a good segue here. So you were talking about, you did end the sentence. So that was good. So he'll cut it out. And we'll start in 1, 2, 3. And what I'd like to say also about dogs and unconditional love, there's a joke that kind of goes, somebody told me this, that they said, you know, Charlie, I want you to think about this. What if you locked your wife in a closet for a week? How do you think she'd react? I said she'd kill me, right? But what if you locked your dog in a closet for a week and then opened the door? That dog would come licking your face, wagging its tail.
It's so true.
Yeah.
I want to understand their and then I want to emulate it in myself. The sense of time. There's
Yeah.
no sense of time.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
like, and their love and affection for you only grows. It doesn't dissipate. They don't get angry with you. Although I think one of the things, because my husband's always looking into, he's always checking out, you know, why do they behave? What are the behaviors? And one of the things he found was they don't, or what we think, they don't seem to have a sense of time.
Yeah.
Whether you're gone an hour, 5 hours, one day, they're going to have the same reaction because of, I guess, the sense of time.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting, they just are so.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And that's big, obviously, in our you know, temporal linear, when we look at when we talk about the spirituality, and we talk about how spirituality doesn't follow a linear path. And Einstein talked a lot about that. And so it's really important that if you want to experience a spiritual life and have a spiritual life, you have to understand that spirituality is not temporal. Spirituality isn't bounded by time. So it's important to understand that, in a sense, dogs are almost our spiritual connection because of that.
Spiritual
But
animal. That's
yeah, yeah. So also, just before we end, I want you to talk a little bit about what you do as far as artwork, because you're an artist, you're a graphic designer, you take great pride in you, and you're wonderful at what you do. And how did that, getting back into that, how important was that for you? Because and the reason why I asked that is because so many people who are injured and they go out on disability, and they aren't woven back into their lives, and they kind of get stuck. How did your work life kind of get you back?
I have my own business, so I run it, and I'm the person that shows up.
Yeah.
So when this happened, I had to, so my business, I'm an art instructor and I run an art business, and you can see, I'll lift my screen a little, some of my art's up there. You can see it on the walls, but that's what I do. All my stuff's back there. I teach after school programs. I teach anyone from 3 to 103 how to paint, draw, use charcoal, anything, any medium. So in this business, I book out about a month and a half. So I went into the hospital. The first thing I thought while I'm sick, I'm like, untext so-and-so, write this email.
Right.
I'm like totally sick. And I'm like, because I'm the only point person.
Yeah.
So I needed to let people know. And what I discovered was, yet again, the beauty of people. I really believe in humanity. So when people are talking badly of humanity, I tend to have a different vibe on that
Yeah.
whole thing. But I've just had great experiences. They when I reached out and said, this is what's going on, they're like, you know, I was like, I may lose some jobs. I don't know. Right now, I didn't care because I was sick. I was just like, I can't even handle
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
about it. But I kept going, okay, I think in 4 weeks I can do it. I think in 4 weeks. And Mike's like, do you think you'll be ready? That, you know, my family, my kids were like, Mom, that seems soon. And I'm like, I'll be out of the hospital for at least a couple weeks, as long as someone can come with me and carry my stuff if I can't carry it yet. So that's where my brain was working. As soon as people did not cancel me, they they just postponed, and they'd say, whenever you can, don't do it in 4 weeks. I'm like, no, let me put you on the schedule. And I did. I went and did it. And one of the groups was, there's a camp and it's all autistic children. And I was like, I don't want to let them down. I want to show
Wow.
up for my autistic program. I want to be there for them. And
Yeah.
they depend on it, and they are scheduled, and they do look forward to the thing they've been told. So I knew when I was saying to the administrator, I was like, I'm going to be there. And she's like, are you sure? I don't want to put you in that spot. And I'm like, no, I'm going to be there. And I was, I was like, I will be there. Even if I don't feel great, I'm going to feel better later. It'll just keep getting better. So that's what got me back out there, was just knowing I had commitments, knowing I would love it, because it always brings out the best in me. Any day that I leave the house going, today I'm a little, today.
Yeah.
And I come back and I'm like, that was the best day ever.
Right.
I'm so glad I went. So
Yeah.
truly, having my own business and that I was the responsible one and I had made commitments is
Yeah.
what got me there.
Wonderful. That's great. Wendy, I am so happy that you agreed to come on to the CoachMD podcast and talk to me. And it's really great having you. And what's so wonderful is that how you came back from a very severe illness. And not only did you come back, but you came back full of life and wanting to live and wanting to thrive. And all those pieces came together to do that. And it's so important for people to understand that you do need all those pieces. And you do have to advocate for yourself. And you do have to have a family to advocate for you. And understand that we are more than just our bodies. And thank you again for joining us. And until next time, I'm Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD, urging you to stay strong in mind, in body, and in soul. Bye for now.